Good day, everyone. It is fantastic to see you all here. Welcome to the Davis. I'm Lisa Fishman, the Ruth Gordon Shapiro Class of 37 Director of the Museum. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today to a special Wellesley Wednesday event celebrating the 20th anniversary of this glorious building. Our speaker today, the distinguished architect Rafael Moneo, needs a little introduction at Wellesley College. We all know him through his work as the architect of this building, with its soaring spaces, refined passages, elegant sightlines, and beautiful light. The Davis Building, with the Collins Cinema and Cafe, were intended not only to partner with the adjacent Jewett Arts Center as an extended arts complex, but also to create a monumental modern gateway to the Wellesley campus. We are fortunate that Wellesley's Architecture Selection Committee for this building had the foresight to choose Mr. Moneo as our architect. He was already well known in architectural circles for his extraordinary 1986 National Museum of Roman Art at Merida in Spain, which brought together the best of modern architecture with the most beautiful forms and materials, creating a vivid image for the present and a very clear feeling for memory and the past. Yet, the Davis Museum was Rafael Moneo's first building in the United States, and we are very proud that Wellesley College was his first American client. Since the 1993 opening of the Davis, Mr. Moneo has of course gone on to create a distinguished record of achievement. Winner of the Pritzker Prize in 1996, architect of the profoundly moving and much beloved Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels in Los Angeles, of the renovated galleries of the Villa Hermosa Palace at the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum in Madrid, of the Miro Foundation in Mallorca, the Audrey Jones Beck Building and expansion of the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, and closer to us, the Chase Center at the Rhode Island School of Design, which opened in 2008, and the new Science Building at Columbia, undertaken by Mr. Moneo together with his daughter, which opened in 2010. In 2012, Moneo was awarded the Prince of Asturias Award for the Arts. In April of 2013, just this past spring, the New York Times called Moneo the greatest living architect in Europe. Rafael Moneo is professor of architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. As the New York Times noted in a recent feature on his practice, Moneo's buildings are extremely site-specific, physically elegant and charged with experiential surprise, often in the plan or through internal manipulations of natural light. Critic David Netto further lauded Moneo's versatility and conceptual sensitivity as being in league with that of architect Paul Rudolph, whose Jewett Arts Center stands across the plaza. Many members of the Wellesley community got to know Rafael Moneo well during the process of the planning and design for the Davis, and we value him as a good friend not only to artists and students and teachers, but also to the works of art housed in this museum. And I would say that everyone who visits here and everyone who works here feels gratitude towards you every day. Let me gratefully acknowledge the generous support for this event provided by the Catherine Wasserman Davis Class of 1928 Fund for World Cultures and Leadership, aptly since it is for Catherine that our Davis Museum is named, and the Wilson Fund. It is now my great honor and privilege to introduce to you Rafael Moneo.
Thank you for coming, and I want to start saying how compelling it is to be here and to feel that 20 years are gone. And I would like to remember Catherine Wasserman Davis, whose generosity and enthusiasm and, let's say, love of life and this willingness to be, let's say, open and generous to everybody, but in a special way to Wellesley College. That as much as I knew her, I ought to tell you that very few people I have known so loyal to an institution as Catherine Davis was to Wesley. It was quite touching to see somebody who loved so much to what the institution she believed was so important in what his life has been. I would like to, let's thank first Lisa Fishman for her wonderful and not always due words, just to my person and my work, and to David Stutterman, her associate director, who has been so crucial in allowing me to be here again. And I think that I will discover which is going to be the content of today's intervention. I very much would like to remind all of you which were my intentions and what I tried to do when we built this building. And once we did that, I would like also to recognize that many of the prayers that came later are in depth with this museum. This museum, I think that was born under the attempt to be specific, under the attempt of test what could be done in such a place, so imposing place as the Wesley campus, and close by to somebody like Rudolph, and also to be able to build a building that could convey at once this sense of, let's say, this sense of keeping symbolizing or representing or keeping alive this sense that I felt of how much the Wesley alumni wanted and loved her alma mater, and how the works of art that were here could be kept in a building understood as a coffer that kept both the feelings of the alumni and also the treasure that they were offering to the college. But let's start on the way without being more, well, obviously the very first words to be said about the beauty of the campus. First time that I came here, I was overwhelmed by this attempt of making a place where nature and culture could live together, and good intentions about society, and in this wonderful nature recreation or manipulation by Olmsted that makes Wesley so beautiful, and that also makes the quadrangle such an important point in the top of the hill, and in a way in the center of the campus. And then later the building should be close by the building that has happened that since I was a student in the late 50s, I was attracted by the work of Paul Rudolph, the architect who tried to mix and to do something where, let's say, still the memories of Wrightian architecture merge with the pleasure young American architects felt walking in Italy, and all that was, let's say, served by marvelous craftsmanship. Rudolph was such a gifted draftsman. He made all those small houses at the beginning of his career in Florida, so beautifully drawn. And then later, the same beautiful drawn obviously was those masterpieces that he made for offering the college and the donors the Jewett family, what this center ending the quadrangle could be, and then later just the token, we could have hundreds of those drawings of the late 50s, early 60s. Then later, Rudolph's career was, let's say, tainted by a certain sadness, because after having, let's say, been recognized in his youth so extensively, and that could be seen almost like the last project of this trend of his career. You see there this wonderful stair that makes this hole in the quadrangle to go down into this square like a plaza where the Davis was going to happen, something that was very frequent and very often made in the work she did, this kind of obliques, this geometry that probably comes from the admiration he felt by Wright. He softened Wright somehow, and softened Wright with some accents coming from, let's say, alto, or even some Mediterranean influences that in those days were so present in American architecture. And then, and therefore, when I heard that something has happened, I need help. No, when we started to think about the campus, to think about what should happen with the new museum, I always thought that the building should be connected somehow with the Jewett, and should do happen because obviously the new museum should be connected with all this cultural center, with the library and the museum gallery connecting with the music small auditorium, and therefore something like a complex should happen there, but also should allow to give meaning to the stair of Rudolph in such a way that you came down into something that could be understood almost like if nature or just isolated buildings happen to be merging with nature, perhaps it could happen here, an episode of, let's say, Italian urban life, and something like a piazza could happen, and therefore, almost from the very beginning, first sketches are always saying that I would like the building to be the mass of the building opposing the volume of the library, and then providing this, by providing the stair, the connection with the quadrangle, that we would be able to move through, and so stretching on this connection, going wherever. And therefore, I would like the building to be seen very much as a building that works just providing this urban form in a rather always difficult attempt of making a building that has this corner, and open also, as I said, the door to go down into something to happen in the campus. I am very pleased when I come to Wesley, and I see that the plaza has been absorbed and taken over, and in a way trees are in this moment softening some much more direct and abstract way of thinking in spaces that still are reflected in a drawing like that, or in an image like that. And I like to go into the quadrangle and to see that our building could be seen almost like this concatenation that allows to this Rudolph stair to be able to stretch on in the new construction. But then, and I'm thinking that I thought whether or not it would be possible to make this kind of museum that could be seen almost like one of those Greek treasures, just presenting and offering all those gifts and all those memories of alumni, and thinking you have seen in the sketch this, let's say, suggested volume opposed to the Rudolph Library, but how it should work. In a way, I'm thinking in this simplicity, I thought this coffer should be, let's say, the result of the minimum, let's say, design intervention. And I would like to see the stairs. You are close by, as just you are entering this kind of architectural artifact that by so doing establishes the spaces in both sides and the voids and structures the entire building. In a way, the simple, let's say, profile and the simple precinct established by the square is later activated and by the stair, this the much more sophisticated closet stair that allows you to go wherever in the museum. In a way, the museum, and I like that, isn't directionally structured. You have many museums that you are brought and just conducted where the architect would like it to happen. Here, you are left in this space, a bit in the tradition of, let's say, buildings like the New York Guggenheim by Wright, where you would like to offer the entire view of the collection at once and as a whole. Therefore, the sketch like that is very important for explaining how this architecture works, because once that was established, I would say that it's much more easy to understand the importance of the section. The stair comes in the middle and establishes those spaces that either enjoy the double height or just produce those the spaces of balconies in the middle where much more, let's say, human scale, the spaces are able to provide this, this sense of intimacy that I very much wanted for the building. Because the stair, if obviously you understand here perfectly the level of the quadrangle, you go down the connection with Jewett, the wing that gives the offices and the access to schools and works of art and so on. This vision from here for temporary exhibitions connected with the storage, the stair that I was talking about, and above all, the light that is attempt to capture the light for this, this metaphor of the metaphor of the sky. I would like now you to see that for understanding more clearly how the building works. The stair at the beginning, the square or the Italian piazza, the connection among those pieces, the small and very tiny and very interesting public space of the cafe and the film theater. Mrs. Davis was so fan of cinema. She very much wanted to be a woman committed with what has been for her modernity. He very much thought that film and film culture was what she felt more intensively, and therefore he very much pointed out with making the complement of the old arts with the cinema as well. You realize now, you are able to identify the square that I show in the sketch, but then later you see all those additions that somehow allow to make those complex penetrations that allow either to small, more private rooms or just the connection with the offices or with the workshops. Now, if we are seeing that, I'm coming here, this drawing shows very clearly we are cutting now throughout here, and therefore we are seeing the stair. This the stair that for me is so important, and the section showing the double steps, and then this model built up later on, and therefore just allowing you. But I would like to stop by for a moment in the stair, because the stair, in a way, I very much want people in museums to be able to find themselves and to keep the sense of their own reactions and their own feelings. And therefore, I always thought that the stair should help people to go through and to move from one floor to another, and from one room to another, allowing to change gears, to change, go through this moment of, let's say, self-reflection that doesn't allow you just to move from one period of art to another, let's say, without this sense of being aware of the self, being aware of how all that we are receiving from the museum needs to go through the filter of our own persons. And therefore, the stair, for me, is a crucial piece, and not only because, as I said, is the keystone for this building architecture, but also because by providing this intimacy enhances this sense of relationship between, I am intimidated in talking about works of art, but in making this sense, I wouldn't like to think in works of art only from terms of transcendency, but also thinking that you need to find out what all those works of art signify, and the meaning they have, and how much your own person is gravitating behind all humanity and mankind efforts that are represented by the works of art. And then, in a way, I don't know why is the reason this slide didn't resist in. I wanted to stop. I wanted to stop here, because as much as therefore it was very characteristic of this museum, this attempt to make a certain congruency between the building architecture and the display of the collection. In a way, working with Susan Taylor, who is a person that I would like to remind all of you today, we reach, let's say, we reached we arrived to think that the collection could be structured, this collection that keeps the feelings and the goodwill of the alumni should be structured in a curious way. And therefore, we thought that this free ground floor should start by holding all the contemporary art. Somehow the building worked just in opposite way of just normal chronology. We started with contemporary art in those ground levels, because below us is the temporary exhibition room, and then moving through those mystery-like spaces of the stair, you go up into the several periods of the art history, and you ended up in what we thought that they were the beginnings and the origins of Western art, the wonderful collection of archaeology and Greek art that Wesley has, and beside that, the collections of, let's say, pre-Columbian art. The origins of art were in the top, and in this moment of when you reach the top, when you reach, let's say, in those very original moments when you believe that perhaps art was felt even more intensely than now, that was the moment to recover also contact with outdoors and contact with the campus itself. And therefore, that is what happened when the collection was on in the opening, the way Catherine Davis knew her museum, and from here, those images provide this sense of just keeping at once this depository of alumni feelings and objects and works of art they love. The light going above, the stairs that brings you into this sky-like, very primary moments. Obviously, the collection and the life throughout these 20 buildings have changed a lot. The way directors have thought that the buildings should work out in relationship with the collection. Nothing to object, but it's true that this sense of congruency and this sense of, let's say, buildings that works together with the collection, this architecture that speaks about very specific goals was gone. And that now the museum, well, even because you need madly more space and you can't have any extension, you need to as happened with houses, that you need more rooms, you divide the largest and more generous and perhaps more structuring rooms like this one because of this mandatory need. I don't extend myself anymore on that, but because we will now would like to think about then from where I came. When I came here, I would say, I would like now to show what I have learned from building or after building the museum. When I came here, I came from a couple of museums that were also very specific. Obviously, the museum in Mérida is so specific that it can be seen almost like a building that enters in the entire history of a city like Mérida, and the building merges truly with the present and past. And that happens here, and happens here. And also in the Museum of Miró, that I have already designed before starting with Wesley, is a building that speaks about specificity, being very specific. So specific that I imagined and I thought Miró's work as a work that resisted classification, that you weren't able to establish any order, and therefore this sense that this kind of attempt to capture the very instant that can be replicated, that makes, at least as a fantasy, every painting by Miró completely different from the others, could happen in the museum's architecture. And that somehow is what I wanted to say here. But this specificity, in a way, and that is a building that comes after Wesley. This sense of delight, this sense of joyfulness, of thinking, architecturally speaking, in mastering the building from the sky, from the roof, happens in a building like that, a building that ought to be seen as a building related with a very professional job. In a way, what we needed was to work out that was a small, well, not so small, but a palace in the center of Madrid that started being built in that started being built this side and was throughout 40 years ending this way. And then it was a building that has been voided completely, and when the Baron Thyssen-Bornemisza wanted this building to put there his collection, I was asked to act as an architect, and then we changed it from this building that has been completely voided, the building that we have seen, that was completely torn down, only were left the facade. But then, by so doing, we were able to rethink again completely this piece, rethinking in a very, let's say, such an abstract way that this sense of specificity that I have been talking when talking about Mérida or Miró completely disappears for just enjoying light, probably this pleasure in light that comes in my latest work is something that I learned here, and therefore I am such a profound depth with Wesley, for so many other reasons, but I could be said that also by that, and that when I was working in Thyssen, I entered in this competition in Stockholm, where the game light becomes, light makes the collection of rooms that put all together, they define the building that you have seen, that is there, but obviously light that somehow is such a present condition and also so pregnant element of architecture that it happens here. And I put this image on the way because obviously we were not inventing anything that architects didn't explore before, and it is quite well known, this house by Son in London, where all pieces are lighted by those skylights in the top, something that probably Son have learned or even consciously taken from the late Roman architecture, and that is something that is also present in a building like the Houston Museum, and probably this sense of just establishing mastering the collection from the top that I learned here in the temporary exhibition, and walking or looking up to the rooms from the small intermediate spaces is here this museum in the city in the north of Spain, in Huesca, and also light. It has obviously to do with that. And then, if I learned so much about light, and light has been so present in most of the museums I did after Wesley, I would like to end up making also recognition to this other feature so clearly present here. You have the quadrangle, you have the Rudolph, and then the stair going
down, the Jewett, and then later our building, and then our stair, and then you go to the facilities, and later to the student center. The building does a kind of something that resists to be seen independently as a single building, and wants to be considered in a broader scheme. The buildings are not anymore isolated pieces, but these concatenations of events that makes this rosary, and something of that is present, for instance, in this, that is one of my latest interventions, this museum in Cartagena, where I just trying to establish contact between Wesley and here. The concatenation I talk about, obviously it is present here, where you go throughout this small, it's called palace, but it was a bourgeois house of the end of 19th century, facing the city hall, and then you go down, and then you go down and go up to this space between these two houses, and you go below the cathedral, the old cathedral without roof, and you ended up in the theater. This is a very intriguing project, because all this photograph you are seeing above is what happened in 1950, 1960. All that has been built. Anybody knew any word about this theater, the Roman theater, and then turning down some houses for let's say, remodeling reasons. Archaeologists started to advert that the gates there could belong to the theater, and then it was excavated, and the theater appeared, and then the architect in this moment makes this concatenation between the old small palace, this device with the stairs allowing to go up, stairs that they're much more blatantly explicit than those here that I much love in the museum, and you go down with something that has to do with it, because you go down also in the dark, and then you appear at the end in the theater. And obviously, and I will end with that, this sense that the buildings are not anymore isolated, but pieces that are embedded in the city as a whole, seems to be that has happened in the enlargement and extension of the Prado, where the existing building by Villanueva that had undergone so many extensions that at the end enters a new transversal axis to colonize the space of the cloister close by Los Jerónimos. Obviously, I am making a bit of rhetoric exaggeration in talking about how I learned that in establishing this rosary of buildings in Wesley, but it's also true that what appears here has proved to me to be more and more, let's say, inevitable, and that architecture ought to be understood as this kind of continuous dialogue and a continuous way of mixing and mingling and merging the old and new, and ultimately thinking in buildings and something that belongs to more larger beings. In the case of the Prado, obviously the city of Madrid, but in the case of Wesley, in something so powerful as the Wesley campus is. And I think that with that I have finished, and I liberate you to go and talk. I would receive questions, but I wouldn't like to be boring, and I am ready to answer whatever question, but immediately after, even more privately in the courtyard.
Great, then I would invite everyone to join us downstairs. We have lunch for the community. So please, let's go
If there are
downstairs.
some questions,